All right, I think we'll start now. I was wondering if people could turn off their microphones just for the moment. We have a little bit of sound coming through. I want to welcome you to this evening where we'll be talking about a local project, which is the Fortis Okanagan Upgrade project. Before we begin, Deep Dive is a monthly webinar that is hosted by First Things First. There are a number of us that planned this one: Lori Goldman, Sue Kirschman, Jim Beatty, and myself, Margaret Hone. And we'll each be talking for a short time just to introduce the project and why First Things First Okanagan feels that it has real relevance to people that are concerned about climate in the Okanagan. And then we'll have just 5-minute little talks that we're each doing, and then there'll be a time for discussion. So feel free, if things occur to you, to put your questions in the chat, and then we'll have a in-person discussion as well. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional and unceded territory of the Seal Okanagan First Nations. And I think it's also time to acknowledge the fact that First Nations have a long history on this land, and Canadian and BC law now gives First Nations a say in land use. Now, in the past, First Nations land was often expropriated for power lines and pipelines like we're talking about. Our government and resource companies would just take right-of-ways for railways, airports, pipelines. Now we see a new era where resource companies are required to consult with First Nations regarding going through their traditional territory. So we see that rural Indigenous communities are having to navigate project permissions. And we need to listen to the diversity of voices and opinions that come out of this decision-making process. So I'd like to just have a few quotes from First Nations leaders in British Columbia that kind of reflects this diversity that we're hearing. Shane Godfreyson is former chief of the Tk'emlúps Teshekpwepemc First Nations in Kamloops, and he is the director in Project Reconciliation. This is a group that wants to buy into the Trans Mountain Pipeline. So he has said, "We have always been on the short end of the stick. A lot of the resources that leave our territory, we never benefited from them." Chief Roseanne Casimir adds, the area the Trans Mountain Pipeline is working on is our area of responsibility. No one else has the right to speak on our behalf about our territories. The outcome that we reach in our mutual benefit agreement has involved a collaborative process. It's resulted in training, employment, and contract opportunities, and compensation for inequalities that date back to 1953. For another perspective, Carla Tate from the Wet'suwet'en says, pipelines through Wet'suwet'en territory go through a number of traditional territories assigned or belonging to hereditary chiefs. The chiefs have all stated verbally their opposition to this pipeline and have never received any meaningful consultation, nor have they given consent to this project. This is part of our Wet'suwet'en law and our responsibility to ensure our territories are intact and healthy for future generations, and to be mindful of our activities that could negatively impact our neighbors. So as settler environmentalists, we should listen to and respect this diversity of opinions as part of our acknowledgement of First Nations history and rights to this land. I'd now like to pass things over to Lori, who's just going to give an introduction to the project. So take it away, Lori.
Thank you so much for that. That was a really wonderful thing to listen to acknowledge. Thank you everybody for coming tonight. A lot of people are just learning about this project proposal just recently, and people are quite surprised, a bit shocked. I'm not an authority on it. I have only learned a few things just recently. And so I'm just going to give a little bit of background about what I understand from my research in about this project that is planned for the east side of Penticton, going from Ellis Creek up to past Chute Lake and just stopping. Um, Fortis Okanagan Capacity Upgrade was filed in November of 2020. And right now there's been an adjournment that was filed just yesterday. And the Citizens Energy Consumer Association has asked to attend any oral presentations by the Penticton Indian Band. And the PIB has to submit a written decision on this. Plus, PIB and Fortis probably need time for their discussions. So formal presentations might resume in April. So it's been a while, but on the website for Fortis, for this project, they say that they are going to be starting surveying April 26th. So the project says that we're planning to increase our capacity in the Okanagan by adding approximately 30 kilometers of new gas line. And the project will be an extension of the existing natural gas system connecting along this area going up to Chute Lake. But if it's going to Chute Lake, why? Possibly we think that they have something coming from Vernon down to connect. So they're definitely planning something more later. The Okanagan Capacity Upgrade project is driven by the increasing demand we are facing in the region and will allow us to meet energy needs now and well into the future. The expansion would strengthen the system for approximately 105,000 homes and businesses in the Okanagan that rely on natural gas service every day. So they are planning to not just service us, but to service more houses or businesses along this route. On the BC Utilities Commission website about this proposal, it says FortisBC is seeking BCUC approval, that's the Utilities Commission, to construct and operate a new gas line extension and associated facilities to increase its interior transmission system capacity for expected load growth. So it's following the existing pipeline, but it can't follow exactly because of archaeological preservation and what they call constructability. And so they can't go right along it, the old one, because of danger. You know, they have to keep us safe. So there will be destruction of property. And they also had to change their original plan because some landowners would not allow them to cross their property. So it doesn't follow what's already there, which means that they have to make a new trail, new path. They are partnering with PACA, which is the Penticton Area Cycling Association, to build more trails and to restore bike trails that are damaged. And they've also donated to local Indigenous events and they support them. PACA is supporting this project because they say that they've been assured that Fortis is going to restore the trails and the sensitive areas that have been destroyed. Fortis says that they will restore them. The estimated cost is $271 million, but that was in 2020. So it's probably more than that now. And that money could go to some other projects. Now, I just want to stick in here that sometimes people think that Fortis is our BC utility. But you know, Fortis is an international diversified electric utility holding company. It operates in Canada, the US, Central America, and the Caribbean. And that's from Wikipedia. In 2015, it earned $6.7 billion. It is a money-making operation. Their shares since 2014, the shares have jumped from $30 to $60 a share. So they don't really care about our environment and they don't really care about the any kind of a healthy planetary future. There's a link to their website where they talk about this project, and you'll be getting that in the resources coming out tomorrow. The BC Utilities Commission is who we are sending letters to and communicating with. It is an independent regulatory agency of the government of BC, and the team is made up of staff and commissioners. Commissioners are appointed by the Lieutenant Governor. They make evidence-based decisions on matters within their jurisdiction, and that's regulated by laws. The commissioners make decisions, and the staff go through all of the regulatory process and give it to the commissioners. Their mission, the BCUC mission, is to ensure that ratepayers receive safe, reliable, non-discriminatory energy services at fair rates from all of the utilities. And they have utilities all around the province. It's not just Fortis. And they also make sure that shareholders of those utilities are afforded a reasonable opportunity to earn a fair return on their invested capital. So their mission is to make sure that companies make money. To fulfill this mandate, our compliance, that's BCUC, oversight includes looking at capital progress, annual, financial, reliability, and safety reports. They are not charged with environmental concerns or climate concerns. They're only looking at the safety of these utility systems and rate control. So they are looking at the rates that we pay, but they're not looking at any environmental impacts. I'm going to share a little video, which is a 1-minute video about what they say they do in this little animation.
In BC, we use energy from energy utilities every day for things like heating our homes, lighting, or charging our electronics. Most of our energy utilities are monopolies that do not have competition. So in order to protect the interest of ratepayers, they are regulated by the British Columbia Utilities Commission, or BCUC for short. The BCUC is responsible for making sure you receive safe, reliable service at fair rates. We balance this with a need for utility companies to earn a fair return on their investments, so they can continue to provide safe and reliable service. Our role is outlined in the Utilities Commission Act. Utilities require BCUC approval for rates, capital spending projects, energy supply contracts, issuance of shares and bonds, and mergers and acquisitions. We also deal with complaints and often request information from utilities to ensure they are prepared for potential risk, so that their customers can continue to receive safe and reliable service. We conduct fair, open, independent, and transparent review processes, which consider many different factors, the most important being reasonable rates and reliable service for utility customers. We strive to make decisions that benefit all British Columbians, and we welcome your participation in our processes. To get involved or to learn more about our role, visit bcuc.com.
So I just wanted to share that with you because that's really what their mandate is. And we have just learned about this project, so we have an ability to raise our voice about this. I'm going to pass it on now to Jim Beatty. Jim is going to be talking about first things first concern about this project.
Well, thanks very much, Laurie. That was an excellent overview of the commission and the work that they do. I'd like to thank Margaret and Laurie and Sue for organizing these deep dives for first things first, and to find ways to educate the public and interested parties about the work that's going on in the environmental world and how climate change is going to affect us and what we can do about it. I'm going to speak briefly about first things first, Most of you will know that we've been an environmental climate change group for 6 or 7 years. We've been a nonprofit. We are a nonprofit organization under the British Columbia Societies Act. We have held many events. We've lobbied our politicians at all levels. We've given presentations at libraries up and down the Okanagan, been at fall fairs and summer fairs. And so this is the work that we've done in order to raise the concerns about our changing climate. Our foray into the Bcuc process is a new step for us, but I think it's fairly obvious that it does have a deep connection to the work that we do. We are very concerned that we keep the climate rise in temperature to no more than 1.5, and at this juncture it seems like this is going to be a very difficult task. At least that's the opinion of the IPCC. And we know that fossil fuels are the problem when it comes to the increased effect of greenhouse gases. So obviously, for a group that's concerned about that, we felt it was very important that we take this opportunity to raise the issues. Now, as Laurie has said, the mandate of the Bcuc is not particularly driven towards protecting the climate or protecting the environment. They do consider, of course, work that happens on the land, but at the end of the day, their responsibility is to see that whatever form of energy they regulate, that it is delivered in a safe manner. And I'm assuming they do quite a good job of that. We all have gas or hydro or whatever kind of electricity, and generally speaking, we have a pretty well-run energy system. The problem is we cannot see an increase in fossil fuels that will definitely affect our ability to keep the climate warming below 1.5 degrees. So that's why we've joined this initiative, because we feel that we need to find a way to speak articulately to the mandate of the Bcuc and to raise that issue in our community. So I would say that there are two thrusts to our initiative. Because the Bcuc will not necessarily be responding in any significant way to the questions of climate change, we need to bring arguments forward that indicate that this pipeline is not necessary. So our focus will be to say that this pipeline won't be necessary in the next 20 years, that there are other sources of energy that we can tap into, and we can give examples of how energy can be produced in British Columbia and is produced in British Columbia. It's going to be a massive cost that's going to be passed on to the people who use the system, and that's not necessary. And I think that, like I'm saying, we need to finesse our argument with regards to the Bcuc, and we are just now in the process, having only become interveners last week, of formulating what our plan is in terms of our approach. We have been in contact with at least one of the other interveners and had discussions about the approach that they're taking and what approach we might take. So that's the first thrust, to at least raise our voice before this organization, which is arm's length from the government, but to let them know that there is a vocal opposition in this region. But the second part of the thrust is to take advantage of this opportunity to be involved, to raise the issue with the public. And I think that's with the public and with our leaders. If we look at what is happening in the Okanagan Valley and in all valleys and cities in the province, they have a mandate to reach net zero by 2050, and we need to insist that they act on that mandate. And it's time to do it now. if we have a pipeline in the ground that has a life expectancy of 20 to 30 years, and if people are starting to sign on to gas in their homes, this type of infrastructure is difficult to turn off. We also know that the plan to reduce natural gas in the Okanagan will not be achieved through only retrofitting. Retrofitting is a great idea. We can cut down the amount of release from our homes, and we can preserve energy that comes into our homes. But at the end of the day, if 50 or 60% of the new builds in the Okanagan sign on to natural gas, then we're going to have a very difficult time cutting the 30% GHG releases in Penticton, for example, down to zero by 2050 if there are more and more homes coming on. And the purpose of this pipeline and the purpose of Fortis is to increase the use of natural gas. So our leaders locally have a role to play, and it is our intention that by speaking to the public and speaking to our leaders, they'll begin to build a climate plan in our communities, in our society, which is feasible to have the achievement of net zero by 2050. So I think it's a broad approach, and I think it's an important one for things first to have undertaken. We feel very emboldened by the opportunity, and we hope that we'll have your input and your support as we organize an education campaign and also a lobbying of our local politicians to make sure that we don't go down the line of increased natural gas in the Okanagan. So I don't have too much more to say about that. And as I said, we're in the preparatory stages. We don't expect we're going to be making our presentation to the BCUC for at least 4 or 5 weeks. So we welcome any of your ideas about your situation and what you think are logical arguments to put before the BCUC. So at that part, I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you. So,
by the way, if some of you are madly scribbling notes and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't have, I can't get all of this down. We're a very organized bunch here at Deep Dive. Everyone who attends tonight will be getting an email tomorrow, and we'll have links to the information, sample letters you can write, some of the main points that we hope you might make in writing to BCUC and elected officials. So you can just sit back and relax. You'll also, I think Lori often provides a link to watching the video again. So don't worry too much about having to make notes. We'll try and make it easy for you. I'm going to show just a few slides that just to give a little bit of a deep dive into the climate action plans that we have in our communities. So let me just share my screen first of all. Well, maybe you have to. Oh, no, there we go. All right. And there we go. And can you see the slideshow without seeing people on the side? Okay, looks perfect. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to remind us all that when we are using natural gas, although it sounds kind of neutral, it's natural after all, we are using 99% fracked gas that comes from deep well fracking that comes from northern and central British Columbia. And if you attended our session last month, you'll learn that there is a lot of environmental degradation associated with the fracking process. So we should keep in mind that the process of obtaining natural gas, it is a fossil fuel, and it also is an environmentally very hard process that is not so great to have in British Columbia. And just to give you a bit of an orientation to what's the big deal about, why do people keep talking about emissions? Most climate plans, whether they're the Paris climate plan or the Canadian one, the BC one, or the climate plans that are developed by municipalities locally, Most are based on reducing emissions. And why that's so important is because I'll just give you a sort of greenhouse gas 101 here. The sun shines on the earth, and we have an atmosphere which we've had for millions of years, and it's part of what protects us and allows life on this planet. It's full of natural gases, our atmosphere. But since the Industrial Revolution, we have put more and more gases into the atmosphere, which creates a greenhouse effect. The gases prevent the sunlight from reaching outer space again. So it gets warmer and warmer here on Earth, hence the climate problems that we have. And methane, which is the component of natural gas, actually has a bigger effect even than carbon dioxide in trapping gases. It doesn't last as long, but it has a more of an effect. That's why people are always worried, not only about the burning of natural gas in our homes, but to produce the natural gas and to transport it in the pipelines and even for use in your homes. There's quite a bit of the methane that actually it's called fugitive emissions. They just get released by mistake. So that adds to greenhouse gas, along with burning it, of course. So what's our job here in the Okanagan? This is a page from the Penticton Climate Action Plan. And I just want you to look at the gray area. This ball shows all of our emissions and where they come from. The dark blue is from our gasoline. So that's all the cars and trucks and commercial vehicles. So as you can see here, we're going to see a huge push to electrification. But the second biggest cause of emissions in the town of Penticton, but this also, I've looked at Kelowna and Vernon climate plans, as well as emissions for the whole regional district. They are about 30%, 30 to 35% of our total emissions is one fuel source, that is natural gas. So as you can see, that's a big piece of this pie. To reduce emissions, this natural gas use has to go down considerably. So that's the job we have to do. 40% in 8 years by 2030. And how many years is 28 years to 2050, if I've done my math right? Now, don't worry too much about reading the fine print on this graph. The main thing I want to show you is on the light blue, you can see this is our emissions right now. And the red line is where our emissions have to get to. So they have to steeply go downhill. And the purple, the dark and light colored purple, that's all from building emissions. So that has to get down to almost zero. So this is a huge job we have here in our country, in our province, and in our small communities to get down to zero. And you can see the purple is the part that we're talking about today, and that's how we heat our homes. Here's another look. And you'll see, when you look at climate action plans, you'll see a lot of quotes that say things like this: eliminating fossil fuels from transportation and heating are the key actions moving forward. By 2030, the majority of savings will be from actions to electrify transport and heating. So this is a big job. Again, the sort of the purple is what how we've got to figure this out. And you see there's a gray hatched area here at sort of the bottom of that steep. That's the part where they haven't figured out how we're going to do it. That's just sort of like to be figured out later sort of thing. That's a big part of our climate plan is not even figured out yet. So I'm just trying to impress on you that we do have a really big job to do, and that emissions from natural gas is a big part of the reduction that we need to do. So again, don't worry too much about all of the writing here. I'm just going to emphasize a couple of things. These are all from different climate plans. One of them says, I believe this is the Penticton one, 75% of our community's new buildings by 2030 will use only zero carbon energy sources. So if we're building a pipeline to service new subdivisions going up from in the Naramata Chute Lake area, how is that going to help us reduce emissions? Have 1,200 houses use only zero carbon energy. The two things don't really make sense. So what you'll see in carbon plans is oftentimes when it comes to how do we do this, they have wonderful targets, wonderful ambitious targets, but the actual mechanisms are quite weak. So they say things like explore or promote or post information. Here's a suggestion: when building a new home, tell your builder you want energy efficiency to reduce carbon emissions. Sign up for this program and learn how to retrofit your home. So there's a disconnect between our very stringent targets and the measures we need to achieve emissions reductions. So First Things First believes that one of the first things that our elected officials and our local governments have to get serious about is to restrict emissions in old buildings and in new buildings, restrict emissions from natural gas. How on earth are we going to deal with that huge gray area in that pie? Okay, let's see if I can turn this off now. Or maybe you can do it for me. There. Sorry. So that's all I wanted to do, is try and show you the task ahead of us. Very, very ambitious climate targets that our cities and regional districts have set out for us, and yet very weak mechanisms to achieve those climate ambitions. We feel that allowing Fortis to expand its infrastructure to have new customers isn't the right way to proceed. And many, many jurisdictions around North America are enacting legislation to restrict the use of fossil fuels in new homes. So that's something we'd like to encourage our local officials to do as well. So I'm going to pass things over to Sue now, who's going to talk about renewable natural gas. This is an argument that is often used by natural gas companies to say that everything's going to be hunky-dory in the future. You don't need to worry about it. So I'll pass things over to you, Sue.
Great, thanks, Margaret. Hi, everyone. So we wanted to talk about renewable natural gas because it relates to the topic of tonight. Because part of Fortis's strategy to increase the number of homes, they're using natural gas for this reason. We also wanted to let you know that Fortis has another application in to the Bcuc to try to get renewable natural gas designated as a low carbon gas, and to get approval for a proposal to provide new homes with 100% renewable gas. And first things first, sees a couple of problems with this application. First, most of RNG isn't low carbon. And second, it simply isn't possible to provide 100% RNG to new homes. Before I explain why, I just wanted to give a little brief overview of what RNG is. So let me just switch to my share screen. I just got a very little diagram here. Renewable natural gas is produced from organic waste, and there are a number of different sources of waste that you can see here, which when it breaks down without oxygen, so in an anaerobic environment, it releases biogas. Biogas can be purified to produce RNG, and the RNG is pretty much the same as natural gas. Both are mostly methane. They just come from different sources. The renewable gas comes from existing plants and animals, whereas natural gas comes from fossils deep in the earth, as Margaret was just saying, which they extract mainly from fracking right now. And here's another little diagram that shows the overall process of what's involved in capturing the biogas and converting it through a purification process into RNG, which is then delivered to customers. And you can see that it's a complicated system. And because landfills, farms, wastewater systems, etc., are located all over the province, this type of infrastructure would be needed everywhere. And this is one of the reasons why RNG should not be designated as a low carbon fuel. Building and operating all of this infrastructure would have a very large carbon footprint. And just a note here, first things first isn't completely against RNG. It will be an important climate solution in situations where there aren't other clean energy alternatives, for example, as a replacement for diesel. We'll be sending you a link to a short video about a dairy farm that uses waste from its cows to produce fuel for all of its transport trucks. So we support the use of RNG in situations like this, but we don't believe that renewable gas should be considered for use in new homes where we already have cleaner, healthier options like electric heat pumps. The second part of Fortis's BCUC application is to provide homes with 100% RNG, and this just isn't feasible. Today, only about 1% of Fortis's gas supply is renewable, and bringing that number up to 100% would require vast sources of biogas, which just don't exist. There are only so many landfills, wastewater treatment plants, large farms, etc., in our province. And we don't want industry to start creating biogas from organics that aren't waste. For example, cutting down trees to produce RNG, as is happening elsewhere in the world. The costing structure Fortis is proposing, I just got it down here, is also unfair. For example, a new homeowner or home customer would pay the base rate for 100% natural gas, renewable natural gas. We'll call that base rate X. Whereas an existing customer who's concerned about climate change and decides to buy 100% renewable gas, they would pay an extra $52.50 per month. This means that the cost of producing RNG would actually be subsidized by existing customers who are climate conscious, which is very ironic. And it's a red herring anyway, as all customers would be receiving the same natural gas, renewable gas mix that comes from the same pipes. I'm just going to stop screen sharing here. And so it's a complex topic, and I've just covered it quite quickly. We'll be sending you links to more information about it. But more importantly, we'll be including information about Fortis's RNG application to BCUC, and we encourage you to write letters about this issue, as well as about the Okanagan Capacity Upgrade. And with that, I will end there, and I'll turn it over to Lori to go over some letter writing tips.
Thank you so much, Sue. Well, all of these have been really great presentations. That was really clear and a bit surprising. So what we are doing tonight, from the information that we've given, is we are hoping that people on this call and other friends would be interested in sending letters in to the BCUC and to media to raise awareness and to share this information with people, because people really are not informed. What I'm going to do is share my screen. We're all doing a lot of screen sharing today. So we're asking people, can you see my write a letter?
Yes, we can see it.
Oh, all right. Sorry.
It's gone. It's gone now.
It is, because I wasn't sure where everybody went. We're going to be sending this document out to everyone tomorrow. And we're also sending a few sample letters that people have already written to give you an idea of how short or how long it can be. It's whatever you want. We're asking people to craft a short letter based on some of the following points, and to copy the letter and paste it into each website. There are websites here, or into each email. It's more effective if it goes individually to each email address instead of sending a group email. And these are the talking points that we think might resonate with you and also help to inform the BCUC about why we are concerned of this issue. So extending pipelines will increase gas hookups and use and increase fossil fuel emissions. Local and regional climate plans commit to reducing GHG emissions and switching to electricity. Natural gas production creates fugitive methane emissions. Methane is a far more potent gas than CO2. New fossil fuel infrastructure is not needed when heat pumps offer high efficiency home heating and cooling. Using natural gas can negatively affect indoor air quality, and pipeline construction crosses many streams and sensitive habitats. So the most important submission is to the BC Utilities Commission. When you go to this website, you're looking for this preceding name. There's a whole bunch. Fortis, this is Fortis Energy. They've got a bunch of proposals and there's other proposals as well, proceedings. And so this is the one that you are going to be sending your letter to. You just put in your name and address and email address, and that's it. And you can just put your letter right in there. We also recommend that you send to RDOS and to send to the counselor, Katie Robinson, and Carla, who's the director of RDOS, and then to the city of Penticton to let them know that we are watching this, to our MLA, to the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change Strategy, and then to different media. When you click on these, there's just a, again, simple form. You put in your name, address, and just paste the letter into a box and just click submit. It's quite simple. This would probably take, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes after you create your letter. We will be sending some other links to you, like what is renewable natural gas, and why it's a bit of a spin, and a few other things for you to learn more about this. But the main focus tonight is to encourage people to write these letters, and we will be sending out sample letters, which look like, I don't know where they went. They're somewhere.
It doesn't matter. People will see them, so I don't think we need to go over them. Thank you very much, Lori. Anything else you wanted to add?
No, I can't really think of anything. Of course, if you do have any questions, you can always reply email to the info at First Things First, and we'll guide you or give you some other information. So we'll be checking our email and responding to people if you have any questions.
Just wanted to add, in regard to writing to the RDOS, I encourage you all to write to whomever is your regional director, as well as the overall chair of the board, which is Mark Pendergraph. We'll put that all in the link that we send you. But for instance, if you live in Kelowna, write to the regional district of Central Okanagan. If you're writing, because all of these regional districts should be aware of the issues we talk about. If you live in Culleton, write to your local area director there. as well as the chair of the board. So I encourage you to, we'll give you the link where you can look up who your director is and send them an email right to them. So I'd just like to address some of the questions that we've had. Someone asks, is Chute Lake within the regional district? And I must admit, I don't know the answer to that question. I assume that it is because I don't believe it's within the Kelowna regional district.
I believe it is.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm in that area and we did receive some notice about it.
It's true. Yep.
Good, thanks. There was another question about environment. Is there an environmental review that's required? Yes. Fortis would have had to have done a separate large environmental study showing the impact and remediation and mitigation for the pipeline project. I don't know if it's, it wouldn't be going to BCUC, and I don't know what government agency would have that project. It's something we could look up, but they would be required to do a very extensive environmental review. Someone also asked, where does BCUC get its money? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if anyone has that they could pitch in, but it's likely.
I think it's a BC government because it is a commission from the BC government, and they are charged to look after us as a BC.
Yeah, utility regulator.
Yes.
Yeah. There was also a question about what is the projected volume of Fortis Renewable Natural Gas? And I know that they have, I've heard the Jason Wolf from FortisBC say that currently he's admitted on the radio that currently they just have 1% of their stream is renewable natural gas. They have projected that they would like to do 17% by 2030. That is a huge leap of an increase. So we feel that they shouldn't be allowed to increase their customer base just on the promise of reaching 17% by 2030. I believe they're projecting something like 35% by 2050. Sue, could you comment on that? Do you recall what their targets are?
That does sound about right to me. But again, like Margaret, like you just said, they're promising 100% renewable natural gas to new homes right now, which obviously isn't possible.
There are two questions. One is, should we recommend that people go solar instead? And another person said, should we recommend that subsidies for natural gas be used for renewable energy technology? All of the things that we care passionately about, like renewable power, like solar, like the amount of subsidies in British Columbia, these are not something that I think would be of interest at all to BC Utilities Commission. I think the biggest strength, I mean, you're free to say what you want to, but I think our biggest strength is saying that increasing fossil fuel infrastructure in this region works against the climate plans that we have, where we're trying to lower emissions here, and that this is not necessary because we have electricity. We have other forms of renewable, other possibilities. We have electricity, we have possibly solar power, geothermal, you could certainly list them. But I think the main arguments we should concentrate on is it's not necessary to increase the infrastructure, and that it works directly against what we're trying to achieve here, which actually it's legislated that we have to achieve these reductions in emissions. So somebody, Dr. Uhas is saying, any journalists or reports attending tonight's meeting? Not that I know of. So those are all the questions I see in the chat. What I'd like to do now, it's 10 to 8, just to open it up for anyone to unmute themselves and ask a question or make a comment. And you know, this is the end of our presentation. So if you'd like to turn your videos on so we can we can see you and just have a bit of a group discussion, that would be wonderful. So I encourage you to if you're not eating dinner, to just show your face and.
I have a question
Please go ahead.
or a comment maybe. Obviously, none of us like the idea of fossil fuels. I think the people that I see on the screen right now are probably here because they're interested in the switch to renewables. So I don't think that's even a question. The question I have is, the reality is probably that people would need to start, buying electric heat pumps or, solar panels, all the other stuff that they need to switch to renewables. That's very expensive. Now, if you look at what Europe has done, and I happen to know this from Germany and the Netherlands, for instance, they create tremendous incentives for people to switch. Okay, yes, I know if I buy an EV, I get some money back from the government, but even if I get that money back, the EV is still more expensive than buying another car. So what I'm just wondering about, and I agree, this goes against our climate plan up to on the graphs you showed, but the other big thing is that the users will still need to make that switch themselves, otherwise it's not going to happen. So I would think that we as an organization need to really push the government in creating these incentives for people to buy that stuff. Like, we actually, I just have a friend actually that we hike with a lot, and he just installed a bunch of solar panels on his roof, and he paid $18,000 for it. That's a lot of money. Now, most people that really need to do a switch like this do not have near that amount of money to do it. So there must be some sort of an incentive thing built in, or a push from our organization to make clear that this is not going to happen unless there's incentives for people to make that shift.
Thank you, Art. That's a good question. And actually, there are both federal and provincial incentives for buying, for instance, an electric heat pump to make that switch, or to buy higher efficiency appliances. But truth be told, those incentives often pay for a quarter to at most a half of the cost.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
Yes, and it has been.
I know these incentives are there. I'm just saying the reality is, if you look at the average earnings of, whatever, people in the Okanagan or in Penticton, they cannot afford any of this stuff.
Seth Klein made a presentation to our deep dive about 6 months ago, and he suggested that if politicians were really serious about wanting people to make the switch, they would actually purchase or produce and make available at a very low cost the things we need to make the switch. I think Jim wants to make a point as well. Go ahead. You're muted, Jim.
I agree with you, Art. I agree with you what you say, that the cost of making the switch for individuals is huge. There's a couple of things that the government should do, I think. One of them is to stop subsidizing LNG, and that would be a huge change in direction. The other thing is that the power that Site C will generate, a lot of that will go to do LNG, and I think that power should be distributed to the people who need it, which is us as consumers. And if that were to happen with subsidies, we could possibly see a lower cost of hydro, because one of the problems that we have is that natural gas is cheap. Natural gas is cheaper than electricity, and that's another impediment for people making the shift. But the reality is that even in our town of Penticton and the Okanagan, all our towns, the amount of natural gas that's being used will not be reduced significantly either by retrofitting, which is also very costly. So there needs to be a definite concerted effort by the government to bring in a number of different directions that will lower the cost of electricity and make it possible for all to switch. We can't do it on our own, for sure.
I agree. Yeah. I really think that's what it comes down to. Ultimately, the users need to make this work. Not the government can set regulations, of course, but you and I will need to start switching to the electric heat pump or whatever. And if we don't, then it's not going to happen.
That's right.
We will burn gas.
There's a related question on how people can afford this from Gunilla. Gunilla has asked, where is Penticton with the PACE program? The PACE program is an idea that I believe is in force in Alberta and a few US states, where you can make improvements to your home. For instance, you could buy a heat pump, and the cost of that would be put onto the taxes you pay. So you could take 20 years to pay it off. And if you sold your house, it would still be there on your it's a property assessment tax program that helps you pay for these things. In Penticton, we're very lucky, actually. The city of Penticton allows you to take out a loan, and it puts it onto your electricity bill. So you've got a number of years to pay it off. That's only for the city of Penticton, which owns its own utility, but it's called the HELP program, Home Energy Loan Program, and I encourage you to look into it if you live in Penticton. And right now, it only applies to renovations, retrofits in your home, but they're thinking of applying it perhaps to purchasing an electric car or an electric bike. So that would really be something if they did that.
Yeah.
So the PACE program is something that it's not in provincial legislation, but they're working on it. They promised it I think in 2020. And so a number of different ministries are working on the legislation to allow municipalities to, or I guess, allow the provincial government to provide loans that would be put sort of like a lien on your house, I guess, onto your assessment. So, so those are all the questions from chat. Anybody want to pitch in now? Raise your hand or turn your mic off.
Sorry. The question I have is, obviously a lot of this is education, and you've tried to do your best to I guess, spread that knowledge. But of course, we're only a small group, eh? And I think, even knowing what an electric heat pump is, I bet you that maybe 5% of the people in the Okanagan, vaguely know what an electric heat pump is. So there's also a level of fear, if you will. What's an electric heat pump? I have natural gas, it's easy and it's all good, and I pay every month, and who cares? So I think there's a lot of education that needs to be done. And I'm not having a solution who needs to do it, but obviously our organization can help doing that.
It's true. And to be fair, the Penticton's climate plan is very new. It just was accepted by the city last fall, and they do have education as a component in it. I think one of the things that first feels like, though, is education is the carrot, but you also kind of need a stick. You need to have, you need to legislate things. So for instance, one option would be to have a bylaw that new homes can't connect to natural gas, or that, or that you can't install natural gas stoves, for instance. I think that as we move forward in time and perhaps don't meet some of those ambitious targets that we've set for ourselves in Canada, I think we will be seeing more and more legislation that requires people to make the switch. Just like in a few years, electric cars will be all you can buy. So education on its own, I don't think is going to get us to where we need to go. So here's a question from Sharon. She says, my house is 3 years old. We're signed up to put solar panels on our house. That's great. No, sorry, sorry, I've got to go in here. The installer informed us we can put up enough panels on our roof to produce electricity to replace our current usage. So there is not enough room on our house roof to get all the energy they need. To put in, would a heat pump, I'm sorry, I'm not reading this correctly. Would a heat pump be better than replacing our natural gas furnace? New builds should not, and she agrees, new builds should not be allowed to have natural gas. I think these are questions that I would really encourage people to have their house inspected by an energy evaluator who will talk about what some of these options are for you in terms of, for instance, I live in a very old home, and I've learned I need to upgrade my whole electricity to the house before I can put in a heat pump. So there's complications. It's not necessarily easy, and I think you need an energy evaluator or someone familiar with home heating to guide you through that process.
So
Thanks.
Margaret, this is
Yep.
Sharon.
Yeah, hi, go ahead.
To clarify a little bit,
Yep.
we're putting solar panels on our house that will replace the current electricity usage, which is all the city will allow. You can't put more on your roof that would actually give you money in your pocket. You can only produce enough for your current usage. So our house is heated with natural gas currently. And even if things change in the future, our installer informed us that the roof of our house is not big enough to put enough panels to be able to switch from natural gas to a heat pump on top of our other electricity usage. So it's extremely restrictive, even though our house is only 3 years old and we have a huge roof. Like, we have a lot of roof space. And so I think the idea of people being able to build new houses with natural gas hookups with even the remotest idea of future retrofitting just isn't going to work.
If I may, can I make one comment? You know, don't forget that putting solar panels on your roof isn't greener than the electricity you get to your house right now. And I'm not sure whether you're aware of this, but our electricity, 99% of it or something, is actually, in a sense, renewable. It comes from water, right? So, and of course, the heat pump would pull so much power, which is why, you know, the conclusion is that you can't have enough solar panels on your roof to replace your heat, to put a heat pump in, and that would be the ultimate solution. Of course, you're saving money by putting, you know, solar panels on your roof. Hopefully, you will be, but it's not necessarily making our planet greener. I guess that's just a comment I'd like to make.
From an emissions perspective, it would be better to make sure you get off fossil fuels, but that's the kind of decision you'd have to talk over with someone more familiar with energy systems.
Right.
We're hoping to do a presentation of a deep dive later on this spring with the Peace Energy Solar Co-op, because they are up in Peace, which is quite cold, and they advise people on the size of systems that they need to manage all of their needs. And then also they, because it's a co-op, they're able to purchase and install at a cheaper price. And so we're going to hopefully have someone come and speak to us about how they set it up and if it would work here and how we would get that kind of a system here to, you know, to help people to see what their needs are and whether they could meet their needs with a system and install it at a cheaper price.
Thanks, Lori. I think Connie Henry has some experience with making that switch and solar power. Connie, did you want to make a comment?
Well, we do have solar power, but it doesn't. Heat pumps are also, some of the technology is difficult with houses. You know, it's not always easy to just do your entire house with a heat pump. So they have to be kind of designed from the get with that in mind, and it is a challenge. Yeah, we do have solar power, but as Art was saying, if you are using, the main thing is getting off the fossil fuels. That's what you were saying, Margaret, is getting off the fossil fuels. Because if you're using electricity, whether you're producing it yourself from solar or whether you're getting it from the grid, the electricity we have here is actually quite good. One of the things about producing your own is that, you know, you are taking advantage of the sun, and you have, you know, it's another, it's kind of a backup system if you have some sort of a storage capacity. So there are other advantages to that. But basically solar in the country, in the province, is underutilized as a source for electricity. And so we have solar, we have wind, we have geothermal, we have tons of hydro. You know, there's no reason why BC cannot provide clean energy and electricity for its folks. And it just doesn't make a lot of sense that we are building new infrastructure for fossil fuel use when we know that we have to reduce it, and all of our plans say we're going to reduce it, and all of our goals say we're going to reduce it, and yet here we are building to supply the increased demand that's going to be there. But that demand, we have to change that. That's just not going to work if we're going to have any progress.
Thanks, Cuddy. And a couple of people have made the point that as we build better homes and retrofit with better insulation, our energy needs should go down. I know, again, the old house I have, with our attempt to put in a heat pump, we've learned that we've got to just redo our insulation properly and make some changes in our home so that we need a smaller size heat pump that we can do with our existing electricity. So there's sometimes the heat pump might be 3 or 4 years down the road, and we've got other tasks to do beforehand. We have actually had a couple of sessions on heat pump installation. So I believe we have those as videos, Lori. So if you're looking at all the ins and outs of heat pumps, it's something you can see on our First Things First YouTube channel. So let's try and remember to send people that link as well.
Sure.
I think we have one more question. Yeah, somebody, Lynn Jackson is mentioning that you don't need a storage system for solar power, since the electricity you don't need goes back into the grid, and you're allowed to then use it for the months that you don't produce as much. So that's one of the nice things that Penticton does, is it has a lower rate of buying and selling. Some communities allow you to put electricity back into the grid, but when you purchase it again, they make you purchase it at retail rates. Penticton does have some good programs like the home energy loan program. And I think we do have to give them credit for, they are trying to help people make the switch. I think we're kind of done. It's 10 after 8, and we've had a lot of good questions and discussion. You can always email us with further questions. We'll be sending you out some information. Even if you can just write 1 or 2 letters, we really encourage you to make your voices known. It's an education for the community. If you write a letter to the editor, it's an education to elected officials who probably don't have a natural gas infrastructure on their radar, but it needs to be. And it's an education to your neighbors if you just have a chat with them about this Okanagan Upgrade project. So thanks very much for joining us this evening. And I think that Lori is going to just talk about what she'll be sending you tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you very much, Margaret. So what I will be sending will be the sample letters for you, as well as the links to the Bcuc, which is the most important, and then to all of the councillors or the city council in Penticton and Rdos. And then media, if you're able to do that, it's quite simple. And also links, there will be links inside the email to take you to the website, and then for some more information, to learn some more about this if you care to. Also, just to let you know that in March, at the end of March, we're going to be having another deep dive, and it's going to be with 3 experts in impact investing, which is ethical investing. And one of our big presenters is Joel Solomon, who has been doing basically ethical investing for many years. They're very knowledgeable, and I think it'll really help us because we have TFSAs and we have RRSPs or RRIFs, and many of us don't know that we are funding fossil fuel companies, and we want to make that change, and that's what the next month's deep dive will be about, is what does it mean, how do we do it, and why do we do it?
Thank you for joining us, and have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so
very
much.
much. It's very good.